Alright, we're back, course talking FF7, and we're discussing summons, which is a topic I've been quite passionate about in the past and still very much am. So almost exactly 4 months ago to the day, we did a video talking about summons, and it kind of covered everything. We kind of touched a little bit on every possible topic really when it comes to summons. But I want to do a more focused video on how they can improve the summons when it comes to Remake Part 3. So for starters, the most obvious way to improve them in the next game, at least to me, is getting them away from the character of Chadley. It's by far my biggest complaint when it comes to the summons with the Remake project thus far, because just about every single summon has to go through Chadley, right? You get 2 in Remake that are, found without Chadley. Those, of course, being the Ifrit materia that Jesse gives you, and then also the Chocobo Moogle materia that you can find on your way to the Sector 5 reactor. You almost have one in Rebirth with Gilgamesh, except that it is tied to the Proto-Relic shit, which is tied to Chadley. So really, it's just those 2 materia in the first Remake game that you can find outside of Chadley, which is very frustrating. Outside of DLC, pre-order bonus summons and whatever. Which to me was kind of a strange choice when it comes to the Remake project, because when it comes to the majority of the Final Fantasy games that I've played outside of like Final Fantasy X and I guess like 16, most of the summons that you get throughout the game are optional and kind of found in the world, right? Whether that's a piece of materia in 7, whether that's, finding a Guardian Force or drawing a Guardian Force from a particular enemy in Final Fantasy VIII, or find a piece of equipment in 9 that will give you one of the Eidolons. I do want to add a little bit, though, that when it comes to the original FF7, I would argue that there are like story-related summons in that game, even though technically every single summon materia in the game is optional. You do come across quite a bit in the story, like Priscilla giving you the Shiva materia, or like Genova Birth dropping like Ifrit or whatever, or finding the Bahamut materia in the Temple of the Ancients. Like, they're there, they're very obviously on screen. You have to kind of go out of your way not to grab them. So I do kind of attach them to the story, but the majority of the summons in 7 are optional technically, right? For some reason, with the Remake project, outside of the 2 materia that we already talked about, you no longer find the materia in the world. It's all through Chadley, right? You just talk to the little cyborg dude, you fight the summons, and then you acquire them, which that by itself I don't hate. And it's like the concept of having to earn the summons is pretty cool, having to best them in combat, and then you can use them for yourself in combat. Pretty cool, right? But why does it have to all be through Chadley? And it's something I hadn't really thought about too much until making this video, but like, we're already fighting them to acquire them, right? Why couldn't we have done that naturally in Rebirth in the world, right? One of the caves that you go to like do the little fucking mini game to like, weaken them in the VR fight and also make the materia more powerful. Why couldn't we just go to one of those caves and just fight them? Just fight them and acquire them. Why'd it have to be through Chadley? It would have been so much more interesting and more compelling to actually have to fight them out in the world and acquire them, as opposed to doing it through Chadley. Kind of crazy too is there's actually a pretty interesting line from Chadley in Remake that I kind of forgot about just because I haven't played through Remake in a while. When you first talked to him in Sector 5 in like Chapter 8, where he talks about how some materia naturally forms in the world, and that's kind of the only way to acquire it, but he thinks he can create it himself, and that's why you fight them to earn them, right?
Cloud, I have the most amazing news. I believe I might know how to develop summoning materia, something heretofore thought impossible. Scientists say that this materia can only be found in nature, but I may just be able to prove otherwise.
Right there, Chadley says that scientists believe you can only find some materia in the world, right? But obviously, up to the point that we're at now, going into the last game of the trilogy, there's been no payoff of that. We've yet to find a piece of materia in the actual natural world. It's possible that could be set up for the last game. There is only a couple pieces of materia left, 4 to be exact, based on the original FF7 with Typhoon, Hades, Bahamut 0, and Knights of the Round. Maybe those can be found in the world. Maybe we, got to go out of our way to get those, and it's not tied to Chadley. It's a bit of copium, but maybe. But if there isn't some sort of payoff to that line of like finding some materia in the world, right, based on what Chadley says, then why even include that in the game? What's actually kind of interesting too is that we have 4 summons left, and there's actually like 4 regions we haven't done yet when it comes to FF7, and this is kind of excluding all the random islands and things like that we haven't been to yet. If we're going to even go to them in the 3rd game, who knows? But we have obviously the northern Icicle Inn area, we have Wutai, the Midil kind of Benora area, and then Rocket Town itself, which is its own region even in the original FF7. It's just a kind of an open field with just Rocket Town in it. But it's probably going to be its own region, I would imagine, when it comes to the next game. Whether or not those 4 summons will be tied to those 4 regions, who knows, right? I know some people want like a bigger thing for the Knights of the Round, some sort of like intricate side quest or story thing. Again, that remains to be seen. Who knows exactly? I just want to point that out, though. So for me, it's kind of the biggest change they can make for the summon materia going into the next game is getting that shit away from Chadley, at least acquiring them. If you want to have like a bit of a middle ground, maybe we could find them in the world and then we go through Chadley to like power them up or something. Whatever, that's kind of okay, I guess. I just kind of want that sense of exploration, and the exploration being rewarding when it comes to the next game, because we don't really have that. And it kind of goes outside of even the summon materia, right? I love to like find like good equipment out in the world, right? Like a good piece of armor, or accessory, a weapon, something like that. But also summon materia and just strong materia in general that's just kind of like hidden in the world. certainly did exist in the original FF7, right? Just using the summons as an example. You have the Hades on the Sunken Gauntlet at the bottom of the ocean. You have Typhon in the Ancient Forest. You have the Knights of the Round on the Round Island that, requires a gold chocobo to get to. Like, you're rewarded for exploring. And the same can be said for just about all the summon materia in the original FF7, right? You got Alexander and Great Glacier, which is, very hard to get through if you don't know, like, the actual pathing. Leviathans in Wutai, which is entirely optional location. Titans in Gengaga, which is somewhere you do go as part of the story very briefly, but it is, 99% an optional location. Also, Odin, of course, in the Shinra Manor, you gotta do, like, an intricate kind of mini-game and then fight a boss to acquire the Odin materia. So it's just something that's kind of missing from the remake project, unfortunately. For me, that's kind of the main one, right? We spend almost 6 minutes now talking about just finding materia in the world, but I'm somebody that values exploration. It's one of my favorite things in any kind of game, especially with open world style games. I want to be rewarded with my exploration, and that's not something we've necessarily got in Rebirth. I do love Rebirth the game, right? I do love the direction they're going. I just want it to be better in the next game. Some of the other improvements that I have don't necessarily matter. They're not as important as how we acquired the summon material in the next game. But there's still, things that I wouldn't mind if they happened. One of them being just being able to level the summon materia like you can any other materia. It's something I complained about in the video I did back in November. It's just a weird thing to change, right? You can level summon materia in the original FF7 just like any other materia. But for some reason with, Rebirth, it's done differently how you improve the materia. And by different, I mean you just have to do this kind of stale minigame where you hit a sequence of buttons. It takes all of like 5 or 10 seconds to do, and that's it. That's how you power up the materia. Now, admittedly, just simply leveling up materia with AP isn't exactly exciting either, but I get more from that than I do this minigame that I get nothing from. It's just kind of an inconvenience. I do like that there's something for, I guess, the summon materia. We get a little bit of lore and stuff like that with Chadley talking about them and stuff. I guess there's something there, but I just, that's probably the worst minigame if we're just talking about, like, the quality of the minigame, right? Of what the minigame is. It's just nothing. You could certainly argue that some of the other minigames are worse, maybe because they're more difficult or whatever, or they're not as fun, or they're not fun at all or whatever, but for me, this is just by far the worst, just because it's just a nothing minigame. In terms of other ways to improve the materia beyond just simply leveling it up would be something like a progression tree, similar to just the folios that we have in Rebirth, which are very simple, very linear, right? There's nothing intricate about them. It's just making your character stronger, right? Giving them more abilities and things like that. It's kind of cool to have something along those lines for the summons as well, which is something we do have in Ever Crisis. In case you've never played the game, there's a growth tree for both characters and summons, and for the summons, it just increases the potency of the attack you do with them, or reduces the charge speed, and you can unlock a second limit break for them. Something as simple as that would be pretty great for the summons. It kind of reminds me a bit of like Final Fantasy X, where you can increase like the stats of summons and also unlock new moves and things like that. But just simply like making the summon stronger would be pretty cool. Maybe you get a currency similar to SP points for the folios for the characters, and you just have like a skill tree essentially for the summons. And each summon in Rebirth and also Remake have like, multiple moves, right? And then a limit break. And it'd be kind of cool if you could just maybe make those moves ever so slightly stronger, right? You unlock a certain node and it ups the damage of that particular attack by just like a % or 2 or some shit. Super simple, nothing complicated. Adds more RPG elements to the game. It puts a little more emphasis on the summons themselves. You can know whether or not they would actually go that far with the next game, I don't know, right? But there's a lot of stuff they added to Rebirth that wasn't a remake that we never would really guess. I never would have thought there'd be a fucking crafting system in Rebirth, right? In the remake project, but they added that shit and a lot of other things about Rebirth that are very different from Remake. So, who knows what they'll do. Besides the stuff we talked about up to this point in the video, finding the summons, naturally in the world or power them up in a different way than we did in Rebirth. Something else that would improve the summons for me in the next game is having them be a part of the actual story to a certain degree. I always love the fan theory of the Knights of the Round being the ones that like helped defeat and still away Genova all those years ago. And I think it'd be kind of cool if something like that was in the lore of the game. Give more purpose to the summons, yet again, as I've talked about. And there's already that to a certain degree. We do have like divine intel in Rebirth, but also assessing the summons, and specifically when it comes to Shiva. Like her assessment in the game like implies that she helped still away Genova back in the day. It'd be kind of cool too if characters in the world talked about the summons, because I don't know if that's a thing. Like, if there's any NPCs in the game, in Remake or Rebirth, outside of Chadley, that ever mention a summon by name, right? It'd be kind of cool to walk around a town and just hear somebody talking about, like, the legend of Shiva or Ifrit or, Knights of the Round or something. Even more than just background dialogue, like, making it part of the story, which is where some people get into the conversation of, making, like, specifically Knights of the Round just because it's, like, the most popular and famous summon from FF7. Be part of the main story. Maybe we got to chase that particular summon materia to help us in the story defeat the weapon enemies and shit. And I'm down for that for sure. But even if they can't make it a part of the main story, it'd be kind of nice for at least one of the summon materials, probably Knights of the Rounds, to have like its own dedicated side quest, kind of lengthy, puts a lot of emphasis on it, a lot of story and narrative and NPCs talking about this particular summon materia. It could be as simple as a side quest with some NPC that's talking about a legend he heard, about a really strong piece of materia out somewhere in the world, or maybe specifically mentions where it's at, maybe located on Round Island still. And nobody can access it, nobody knows where it's at, it's hidden, nobody can find it, whatever, something along those lines. And either we fly there with the Highwind, or maybe we gotta acquire Gold Chocobo, assuming that there is breeding in the game, and that's how you access it or something. And honestly, that's kind of it. I don't need a whole lot to improve the summons in the next game for me. Just let's acquire them in a different way. That's the main fucking one, dude. We can still kind of do everything else the same, maybe. But let me acquire them non-Chadley. Let me do something else, please, with the third game. And then beyond that, if we can power them up in a different way besides doing the stupid mini game, that would be nice. But also, if we can add them to the lore or the story itself, even if that has to be side questing to earn a particular material, that'd be great. Because again, I don't know. You guys can let me know, because obviously I can't remember every piece of dialogue in both games. There are a lot of dialogue in these games. Does anybody besides Chadley ever mention a summon by name or ever talk about the summons, as in the legends of them and what they might have done in the past or whatever? I guess kind of lastly here for the video, just more summons would be nice in the next game, because as of right now, there's only 4 left from the original FF7, so they're either going to have to make those really relevant and important to the next game, or they're going to have to add a couple more. I mean, they can obviously bring some over from Remake and Rebirth, but in terms of relevancy to that game, it's got to be more than 4, you would think. So what would those new ones be? No idea. But that, of course, is where I pass off to you guys. So summons so far when it comes to the Remake project, what are your thoughts? Are you fine with them? Do you want there to be something different when it comes to the next game? What are your thoughts, from Remake to Rebirth, how they handled the summons? Particularly, if you want some changes to the summons in the next game, what do you want to see? Either way, that's the video. Subscribe to if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DaveYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.